We even got to hear it now. Like when you're kneeling, what could you hear? The cacophony of babies singing. And you still hear it. Isn't that awesome? It's like whatever your favorite song is, like if you could turn on like with iTunes thingy in your car and just blast it, what would that be? Like what's your favorite song? Like when you hear that song, if there's nobody around, you'd actually sing it, put up your hands, you know, don't let anybody see. You ever drive in and like you see somebody just dancing in their car, they're just so excited because they're listening to their favorite song. One of my favorite songs was introduced to me by one of my dear friends. His name was Pat McFalls, a long, long time ago. I was in the 7th grade, and I'd never heard of this band before. And I probably shouldn't talk about this band in church, but I'm gonna be open with you. It was The Doors, it was Jimmy Morrison. And I heard for the first time on an old record player, the song Break On Through to the Other Side. Man, we used to just listen to that up in his room. We weren't smoking anything, but we were just like listening to that. We just loved that, you know, the keyboard and all that type of stuff, and then Jim Morrison. And then, like, Jim Morrison was influenced by a guy who's a poet. His name is, his name is William Blake. And I thought it would just sound intelligent if I quoted a poet, so that's why I'm gonna quote this guy. William Blake said, "If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it truly is, infinite." And so Jim Morrison, seeing that, he named his band The Doors, because he knew if the doors of perception were open, everything is infinite. And whether it's Baby Shark, if you like that song, if that came to your head, or if it was Break On Through to the Other Side by The Doors, or my favorite song right now, which I was blasting as I drove up here, it takes 20 minutes to listen to this, the Romeo and Juliet Fantasy Overture by Tchaikovsky. Yeah, just listen to those French horns. You will rock out on that, I'm telling you. It frees you like anything. It just is like, yes, they're all tapping into something, but they're not gonna get there. It's like all of music does this. It can bring us up. It's truly a stairway to beyond. And that's what we're hearing. Did you notice that in the gospel today? It's the only time we know Jesus was singing. We know he sang, but Mark was like, Jesus sung. And then what were the last words off of Jesus' lips that we hear in the gospel? It's what we sang in the psalm. My God, why have you abandoned me? What does music do for us? What does singing do for us? What does the sound of music do for us? It makes us go beyond where we are. Because let's face it, if this is all there is, it's really not worth it. We're always restricted, and you can hear the tension in the gospel, can't you? Of like, everybody wants the time and the space and can control it, whether it be the Jews or Pilate and the Romans, or even the disciples trying to control Jesus. And then all of a sudden you have these little bursts of sacramental moments that take us beyond, not just to like infinity and beyond, like the famous cartoon would say, but to heaven, to a personal God that loves us. Maybe today or this week, you could take the Evangelion home with you, listen to your favorite song, and then reread this gospel and see how the tension is constant. They're always trying to restrict Jesus in time and space. And in his human nature, he allows that to happen. But what always happens? His divine nature breaks on through the other side. You see, what Jim Morrison was searching for, and he said he couldn't find it because love is not the answer, he was missing out. He was so close. He ended up, unfortunately, dying, I think, in a bathtub in Paris. Not a great way to go. But truly, he left us something that it touches on something that's so profound and important for all of us. That our human nature is created in the image and likeness of God. That the time, you know, like our agenda that we have to keep, you know how sometimes we can't even sit still for a moment because we're thinking, I've got to go to brunch after this, and then I got my mother-in-law's this, and then I got the kids this, and then we got the soccer this, and then tomorrow I got this. And constantly, our cell phones are going off, The alarms are going off. Don't you hate the alarm clock? Is there anything worse than to hear the alarm clock at like 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning? It's pretty darn pathetic, right? Like, could you imagine all eternity having to hear an alarm clock? I got good news for you. In heaven, there are no clocks. Sorry, Apple Watch. You're not making money on us in heaven. You know what I mean? It's like you can well, I actually took my watch off years ago because I couldn't stand having to look at it. That's bad for you because then I don't know how long the homily's going. But it's good for me because I enjoy life without time. And I usually show up late to everything, so that's Mexican time. That's not the point of what I'm trying to say, though. It's just that time sometimes holds us back, you know? And God knows that. He created that so that we would rely on His time. So it's not chronology, it's kairos. It's His love. That's where we're going to get to be able to break on through to the other side. And how many times do we feel this? Like, think of the most awesome moments of your life. Fulton Sheen would describe heaven as like those great moments of life being those little hors d'oeuvres, those appetizers. You know, the ones that everybody like flocks to when they come out? Yeah, that's what it is. You taste it in these moments, like when you're with your family, or maybe it's with your loved one, or maybe it's with your spouse, or whatever it is, you know, and you're just really enjoying it, and then you forget that time exists, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, we gotta go. Right before that, we gotta go. That's a little bit of like what Jesus is trying to allow us to experience in this gospel. And notice how He's trying to do this. He's taking on the worst pain and suffering that we all could feel. Yeah, like the slamming of a needler right on our... Now imagine if your big toe was underneath that. That would hurt. You didn't hear the gasp of a cry, so that's a good sign. You know what I'm saying? But that's the problem, is that when we hurt and we have pain, we tend to then say, God can't exist. Because why do I feel this? And Jesus is saying, that's why I came. Because He knows that in our freedom we have choices, and sometimes those choices can lead to all kinds of crazy stuff, and He chooses what? To bring His divinity into our humanity. And so, maybe today, and maybe this week, we can allow the music of Jesus' voice, the beauty of His song, to be harmonized with our heartbeat. And perhaps for just 1 week, we could allow ourselves to break on through the other side. In other words, experience heaven in our hearts by knowing Jesus comes to break the barrier of GPSs and agendas. Because in heaven, there is no space. There are no coordinates. In heaven, there is no chronology and agenda. It's in God's space. It's in His infinite love that Jesus is trying to draw us. And when you look through the gospel, the drama of this gospel, that's what you hear. You hear that. You know the Baby Shark song, which is a classic, obviously. I couldn't connect with one of my little nieces. I hadn't seen her in a while and all this type of stuff. We're in the car together, and all of a sudden the Baby Shark song comes on. And she's just kind of laughing. But when I forgot that I was an adult and started doing all the Baby Shark stuff, we bonded like nothing. And sometimes God is that little baby in us, that little creature, that little baby boy that was born in Bethlehem. He needs us to get outside of sometimes of that adult, restricted, perfect, polite world and plug into His divinity and submit ourselves the way He did to the Father. It's weird, right? Like, freedom is found by singing the hymn that Paul sings in the second reading today. It was a Christian hymn. It's probably one of the first hymns. And what is it about? Jesus Christ becoming a slave so that His human nature could unite to ours, while at the same time as a way to access us through His divinity, so that none of us would be left behind. That's the pathway that He leads us towards. Taking our suffering, taking those moments where we feel the pain and the time of our lives and uniting it to the life of Jesus, uniting it to the divinity of Jesus Christ. You know, yesterday, and I'll end with this, I promise, because all things do end with this, right? We had a funeral here, and it was a dear man who was in the army. Have you ever heard taps play? That is basically, that's it. How music can kind of pierce a moment and get us out of our coordinated, time and space type of thing and bring us to something beyond. There was this little boy, I watched him as taps was playing for his grandfather. He was sucking his thumb. He was 2 or 3 years old, blonde-haired kid. He was just playing out. He caused Mark Garrity to get a headache because he was playing in the garden out there, throwing dirt all over the place. And I was like, that's exactly what I used to do. It's so awesome. I was like, yeah, keep going at it. They're like, Father, no, don't worry. Sorry, Mark. Anyway, so then it's taps. So he heard taps. He came over and he stood by his grandmother who just lost her dear husband. He didn't understand the emotional weight of the moment, but he definitely listened and didn't move once taps started to play. Taps was originally basically like lights out. Someday we'll have our own lights out and taps will play. But that's not the final song. The final song is going to need to be played out in your life in Jesus Christ.